It's going to be a session of 3 different videos where we're going to configure app controller, high availability, then we're going to enable clustering for app controller, and we're going to utilize our Netscalers in order to provide scalable high availability solution for enterprise mobility using XenMobile Enterprise and Netscaler. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to configure just high availability to start. The way we provide high availability, we have an active node and a passive node where they both share the information. In the case of any failover, the secondary node will take control as the master. So we'll talk about HA first. We're going to configure the HA. You're going to need for HAs is active passive, so we're going to need 2 different app controllers. You can see here I have my app controller. I'm going to have my main app controller, and then we're going to go into my secondary app controller. So let's start with the first one. First thing we're going to do is we're going to log in to this app controller. I previously configured this app controller, but I will show you the process. Show you the process to follow here. Okay, so I'm in my master app controller. I'm gonna log in with admin password that we have set up. Right, the first thing we're gonna do, so this box you guys can see I already have pre-configured. So if I go into a browser, you can actually navigate to it from a browser. So I could go here and go HTTPS, put the IP address of that primary app controller. Try my IP here, and I could log in. You can see I have just basic configuration. I have my network configuration, the naming. I created third a DNS record for the third IP that we're going to use for the load balance, and I'll show you how that's going to make sense in a minute. Got everything configured. I got my certificates already assigned for this app controller, which we're going to leverage that for the HA. Remember what I mentioned, it's active passive, so they're going to switch from primary to secondary in case of failure. So going back into the setup, go here and you'll see that I have a local IP set up to this guy, which is my 10.21, and then we're going to use another IP for HA. We'll see that how that's done. First thing, we go into the number 1, which is high availability, and it's going to ask you for certain information here. Role preference, this is going to be my primary. Set this one as primary, number 1. And we're going to go into option number 2, where it's going to ask us for the virtual IP, peer IP, which is going to be the secondary app controller IP, and a shared key that we're going to use for communication handshake between them. So go there, number 2. First thing is going to ask what's going to be the virtual IP that we're going to use. This is what I mentioned, that I have a third IP that I assign. This is the IP that's going to be owned by both of the devices once they're in an HA pair. So this is what the HA mode is going to use as communication. So when you point to the app controller on an HA, you will point to this IP, and therefore you will then need a DNS name. I have here my DNS name on Active Directory. Go into my DNS. See, I have a DNS name on my DNS console. You'll see that I have an entry for AC. It's 192.168.10.20, which is I'm using as the virtual IP for this HA pair. We'll set that up. Next thing is going to ask who is the peer IP. So this will be the second app controller. You guys can see here on my app controller number 2. you go here, you can go and see. If you go to Express Setup, you can see that my IP address on this guy is 22. So what I'm telling you, my peer IP address is 192.168.20.22. Then it's going to ask me for a share key. Could be anything. It could be complicated. It could be simple. There's no restriction on this high availability share key. When we go into clustering, it changes a little bit. There's a little bit more restrictions. We'll look into that. So we did this. We're going to commit the changes. Hit yes. And what we can do now, we can actually go into status and we can see what's happening here. So because primary is a share key HA status, so we're going to go ahead now and go into number 3. You're going to enable high availability. Say yes. Alright, so once that's completed, you're going to see now, you can go back and you can go into show status. You see it's telling you HA is enabled but standalone because we haven't joined the second one yet. It's preference primary, the IP, virtual IP going to be used, and who's the peer IP, share key and status standalone. So from this side we're done. We're going to go now under second app controller. This is app controller number 2. We can see here this is the IP that we use. We're verifying everything is set up. So we're going to go now into high availability. So role preference for this guy, it should be secondary. So already set up a secondary. We can just restate that. And then we go into option number 2, where we're going to tell them who is the primary, which is 21. That was the IP that I assigned. Remember, we had IP for the box and then the third IP that we're using for high availability. So that's the peer IP, which is the primary box. We're going here now. We're going to put the key that we set up on the other side. And we're going to commit the changes. We say yes. Then we can go and enable high availability on this box. You guys see it's coming up as a secondary. And the peer is primary. And then once it's finished, you'll see that we can actually look at the status. And it's telling you peer IP is primary, shared key that uses, and the peer is set up as primary. So pretty much we have that already. That completes the HA configuration. So there's an easy way to test. Go into a browser. Guys, recall that I set that up, the virtual IP as 20. We can hit that as by IP. Or I could also just go and use the name that I created. AC.training.lab. And we always have to put the 4443 for the, or there is, we're going into logging into the box. So I also previously logged in. So you see I'm logged into the box using the virtual IP. So if I go now to this guy, for example, and I force failover, so you see now this shows me status. I'll finish in a second, so I could go status now. And telling me that I'm secondary, my peer is primary. So I go into the other box. I could see now status here as role preference secondary. However, my status is primary because I failed the failover. Now if we go back, hit this by the virtual IP name. Box is coming up and it's connecting to the second box. We can actually go ahead and shut down this guy if we want to make testing here. So you can see now that my the primary controller is shut down. So we go now into status. We see here the preference secondary. Status standalone because there's no secondary box. I shut it down. If we go back into the browser again and we hit this through the HA name, we're able to connect. So that's high availability. So what we're going to do now is in the next video, we're actually going to add clustering to the configuration. Because when you go into larger environments, you got large amount of users, you want to have some additional horsepower and workers that you can add to the configuration.